What does an act of kindness truly cost? For Elena Petrova, a waitress drowning in debt and despair, it was a plate of hot food she couldn't afford to give away. Her customer, a nameless, shivering homeless man, who was just another face in the city's forgotten crowd. She risked her job, her only lifeline, for a moment of compassion. She thought that was the end of it. She was wrong. It was just the beginning. Because the man she fed wasn't just another homeless person. And when he returned the next day, he wouldn't be looking for another free meal. He would be looking for her. Stay with us as we unravel a story of desperation disguise and a single decision that changed everything. The rain didn't just fall on the city, it assaulted it. A relentless, wind-driven downpour that hammered against the large plate glass windows of the Silver Spoon Diner, making the neon sign outside bleed a blurry pink and blue onto the slick asphalt. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee, sizzling bacon grease, and the quiet desperation that clung to the late-night shift like a shroud. For Elena Petrova, the smells were just part of the soundtrack to her exhaustion. At 26, she felt closer to 46. Every bone in her body ached a deep, weary throb that started in her worn-out sneakers and worked its way up to the tense knot at the base of her neck. She moved with a practiced economy of motion, refilling coffee mugs, wiping down sticky vinyl booths, and forcing a smile that never quite reached her tired grey eyes. Her life was a ledger of mounting debts. There was the rent for her tiny, drafty apartment, a place where the landlord, Mr. Henderson, was already making noises about being 2 weeks late. There were the utility bills, each one a tiny paper cut on her meager budget. But the heaviest weight, the one that crushed the air from her lungs in the dead of night, was the cost of her younger sister Anya's medication. Anya, bright, brilliant. Anya was only 16, and a rare autoimmune disorder was methodically dimming her light. The experimental treatment that gave her a semblance of a normal life wasn't covered by any basic insurance, and each prescription vial cost more than Eleanor made in 2 weeks of grueling shifts. So she worked. She took every extra shift her manager, Marco, would throw at her. She picked up discarded newspapers to scour the wanted ads for a second job, any job that could fit into the slivers of time between sleeping and serving. Her own dreams, the ones where she stood before a canvas with a paintbrush in her hand, felt like relics from another lifetime. Her sketchbook, filled with charcoal portraits of weary commuters and hopeful children, lay buried at the bottom of her locker, its pages as dormant as her ambitions. Petrova, table 4 needs a check, and the coffee pot is looking thin. Are you daydreaming again? Marco's voice was a rasp, sharp and unpleasant, cutting through the diner's low hum. He was a man whose small authority had inflated his ego to bursting point. With slicked-back hair that was a shade too dark to be natural and a pencil-thin mustache, he patrolled the diner floor like a petty tyrant in his little kingdom of linoleum and chrome. "On it, Marco," Elena replied, her voice flat. She avoided his gaze, focusing on the murky, brown liquid in the coffee pot. He loved to watch her, waiting for a misstep, a forgotten order, any excuse to remind her how replaceable she was. It was then, as she turned from the coffee machine, that the bell above the door chimed a feeble sound against the storm's fury. A man stood dripping in the doorway, framed for a moment by the tempest outside. He wasn't just wet. He looked as if he'd been submerged in the very essence of the storm, his clothes a threadbare coat over layers of stained, mismatched fabrics were soaked through. His long, matted hair and grizzled beard were plastered to his face, and water ran in rivulets down his deeply lined cheeks. But it was his eyes that caught Elena. They were a startlingly clear blue, and in their depths she saw not the wildness of insanity or the dullness of intoxication, but a profound, hollowed-out emptiness. It was the look of a man who had lost a fight with the world a long, long time ago. He shuffled towards the counter, leaving a trail of dirty water in his wake. He didn't look at the menu. He didn't look at her. He just stared at the worn Formica countertop, his hands trembling slightly, whether from cold or something else she couldn't tell. "Sir?" Elena asked softly, approaching him. He flinched as if the sound of her voice was an unexpected blow. He slowly lifted his head, and his blue eyes met hers. Just some water, please," he rasped, his voice rough with disuse. "And maybe, do you have any old bread you're throwing out?" Marco materialized beside her, instantly his presence radiating disapproval. "We're not a shelter. This is a place of business. If you can't pay, you have to leave." The man's shoulders slumped, the brief spark of hope in his eyes extinguished. He nodded slowly, a gesture of weary acceptance, and began to turn away. Something inside Eleanor snapped. It was the sight of that slumped posture, the utter defeat in that simple nod. She saw her own struggles reflected in his. She saw the world's indifference, the cold calculus that decided who was worthy of a warm meal and who wasn't. She thought of Anya, of how terrifying it was to be at the mercy of circumstances you couldn't control. "Wait," she said, her voice firmer than she expected. Both the man and Marco turned to look at her. Ignoring Marco's thunderous expression, Eleanor looked directly at the stranger. "The special tonight is meatloaf with mashed potatoes and green beans. It's hot. Sit down. I'll get you a plate." The man stared at her, his jaw slack with disbelief. "Did you not hear me, Petrova?" Marco hissed, grabbing her arm. His fingers dug into her bicep. "That's coming out of your pay. All of it. You know the rules. No freebies." "I know the rules," Elena said, pulling her arm free. The defiance felt foreign and dangerous, but also strangely liberating. "And I'll pay for it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a customer to serve." She turned her back on Marco's sputtering rage and walked into the kitchen. The cook, a burly man named Sal, gave her a sympathetic look but said nothing. He knew as well as she did that Marco's wrath was a storm of its own. She plated the meatloaf herself, making sure it was the biggest piece, adding an extra scoop of creamy mashed potatoes and ladling rich brown gravy over everything. She added a warm bread roll and a pat of butter on the side. When she carried the plate out, the diner seemed quieter. The few remaining customers were pointedly not looking, but Elena could feel their curiosity. The homeless man was sitting in the booth furthest from the door, as if trying to make himself as small as possible. She placed the plate in front of him. He stared at the food as if it were a mirage. Steam rose from the potatoes, carrying the savory scent of a home-cooked meal. A single tear traced a clean path through the grime on his cheek and dripped onto the table. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice cracking. He picked up the fork with shaking hands. Elena just nodded and walked away, her heart pounding. She could feel Marco's eyes boring into her back. The cost of the meal would be more than a third of her tips for the night, a painful blow that would make the end of the month even more impossible. But as she watched the man eat with a slow, deliberate reverence, she felt a flicker of warmth that had nothing to do with the diner's overheated furnace. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in a very long time. She had made a difference, however small. She busied herself at the far end of the counter, polishing silverware that was already clean. After about 15 minutes, she glanced back at the booth. It was empty. The plate was clean wiped so thoroughly it looked like it had already been washed. Next to the plate was a damp, crumpled dollar bill and a few coins. A pathetic attempt at payment that must have been everything he had. And beside the coins, something else. A small, intricately folded paper bird. It was made from a discarded, rain-softened lottery ticket. The folds were precise, perfect. It was a tiny, beautiful thing, left in a sea of grime and grease. Elena picked it up, her fingers tracing the delicate wings. A strange feeling settled over her. She tucked the paper bird carefully into her apron pocket, a fragile souvenir from a costly act of kindness. She had no idea that the transaction wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The morning after the storm was cruelly beautiful. Sunlight, sharp and brilliant, streamed through the window of Elena's apartment, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air and highlighting the peeling paint on the walls. The false cheerfulness of the weather did nothing to lift the cold stone of dread in her stomach. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Anya's school nurse. Anya had another dizzy spell this morning. Her prescription is running low. Please remember to bring the refill by Friday. Friday. 2 days away. The refill cost $480. Elena checked her bank account app. Balance $62.37. The math was a brutal, unforgiving tyrant. Even with the paycheck she was due to get on Friday after rent, and Marco docking her for the meatloaf, she would be nowhere close. The familiar panic began its icy crawl up her spine. She shoved the feeling down, dressed in her stiff pink and white uniform, and forced down a piece of dry toast. Desperation was a luxury she couldn't afford. What she needed was a plan. More shifts. Maybe Sal knew of a place that needed a dishwasher. Maybe she could finally sell her grandfather's old watch, the last thing she had of him. When she arrived at the Silver Spoon, the air was thick with tension. Marco was behind the counter, a smug, predatory smirk on his face. He didn't greet her. He just watched her clock in his eyes, promising retribution. The day was a blur of petty torments. He assigned her the worst station, the one with the wobbly table that always drew complaints. He forgot to put in one of her table's orders, leading to an angry confrontation where the customer blamed her for the delay. He followed her around, criticizing the way she wiped the tables, the way she poured coffee, the way she breathed. Elena gritted her teeth and endured it, her spirit eroding with each passive-aggressive jab. Her tips were abysmal. People were irritable, and Marco's hovering presence made every interaction awkward. Around 2 p.m. during the late lunch rush, a woman came in. She was impeccably dressed in a sharp business suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She sat in Elena's section and radiated an aura of impatience. "I'm in a hurry," the woman snapped, not even looking up from her phone. "I need a Cobb salad dressing on the side iced tea, no lemon, and the check, now." "Of course," Elena said, scribbling on her notepad. She rushed the order to the kitchen, then quickly brought the iced tea. She placed it on the table, but the woman gestured dismissively, without looking up. Her hand accidentally, knocking the base of the tall glass. It tipped, sending a wave of amber liquid and ice cubes cascading directly onto the woman's cream-colored laptop, which was open on the table beside her. The woman shrieked, as if she'd been physically struck. "My laptop! Are you an idiot? Look what you've done!" The computer screen flickered and went black. Elena froze, her blood turning to ice. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix a $2,500 laptop. I have a board presentation on here that's due in an hour." The woman wailed, her voice rising in hysteria. Marco was there in a flash, his face a mask of faux concern for the customer and pure, unadulterated fury for Elena. "Ma'am, I am so sorry," he oozed, pulling a rag from his apron and uselessly dabbing at the keyboard. "This is completely unacceptable. Our staff is usually much more competent." He shot Elena a look of pure venom. "Petrova, my office. Now." The walk to the tiny cluttered office at the back of the kitchen felt like a march to the gallows. The other waitresses, Jessica and Maria, watched her with pity in their eyes. Marco slammed the door shut. The small room smelled of stale cigar smoke and bleach. "I have had it with you," he seethed, his voice low and dangerous. "First you think you're running a charity, giving away my inventory to every piece of trash that wanders in off the street. Now you're destroying customer property. You're a liability, a menace." "It was an accident, Marco," Elena pleaded, her voice trembling. "She knocked it over. I don't care what happened," he roared, slamming his hand on the desk. "I care what the customer saw, and they saw you clumsy, incompetent, you ruining her property. You're fired, Elena." The words hung in the air, sharp and final. Fired. The floor seemed to drop out from under her. "Marco, please," she begged, the humiliation burning her cheeks. "You can't. My sister. I need this job. I'll pay for the laptop. I'll work for free. Just please don't fire me." "Pay for it." He laughed, a cruel, ugly sound. "With what your generous tips, don't insult my intelligence. You're done here. Get your things from your locker and get out. Your last check will be mailed to you." He pointedly picked up a stack of invoices, dismissing her completely. Numbly, Elena stumbled out of the office. The diner was a cacophony of sounds she could no longer process. The clatter of plates, the chatter of customers, the sizzle of the grill. It was all just white noise. She walked to the staff locker room, her body moving on autopilot. Her hands shook as she gathered her meager belongings, a spare apron, a tube of hand lotion, her worn-out copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. And then she saw it. Her sketchbook. She had left it here last night, too tired to even think about taking it home. Her heart seized. It was the one thing that was truly hers. She grabbed it and turned to leave, but her purse strap snagged on the locker door, pulling it from her shoulder. The contents spilled across the dirty floor. Her wallet, a handful of loose change, a crumpled tissue. Her keys. As she knelt to gather her things, a sob escaped her lips, a raw, ragged sound of pure despair. She was fired. She had no money for Anya's medicine. She would be evicted. She was utterly, completely defeated. Jessica came in and knelt beside her, helping her pick up the coins. "I'm so sorry, Elle," she whispered. "He's a monster. That woman practically knocked it over herself." "It doesn't matter," Elena choked out, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "It's over." She shoved her belongings into her purse and walked out of the locker room, through the kitchen, and out the back door into the alley, not wanting to face the customers or Marco again. The alley stank of garbage and regret. The bright, sunny day felt like a personal insult. She leaned against the rough brick wall, gasping for air, trying to stifle the wave of hysteria that threatened to consume her. In her haste, in her overwhelming panic, she didn't realize that her precious sketchbook had slipped from her grasp and fallen open on the grimy asphalt just inside the kitchen's back door. She walked away, leaving the most important part of herself behind, oblivious. Inside Sal, the cook saw the book, picked it up, and placed it on a prep counter, intending to run it out to her. But then a large order came in, and in the chaos of the lunch rush, the book was forgotten, lying open to a half-finished charcoal portrait of a man with haunted blue eyes. The next 3 days were a descent into a grey, featureless hell. Elena woke up each morning with a jolt of panic, the reality of her situation crashing down on her anew. The silence of her apartment, usually a welcome respite after the diner's noise, was now suffocating. It was the sound of unemployment, of clocks ticking down to deadlines she couldn't meet. She spent hours online applying for every service job imaginable: barista, hotel maid, cashier, warehouse, stocker. Her inbox remained empty. She walked for miles handing out resumes to any place with a help wanted sign, only to be met with polite dismissals or promises to keep her application on file. The eviction notice appeared under her door on the second day. It was bright pink, the color of cheerful cruelty. It gave her 5 days to pay the overdue rent or be out. That night, she ate the last of her ramen noodles, staring at the damning piece of paper. The thought of telling Anya she couldn't afford her medicine was so painful she physically recoiled from it. On the third day, the final day before Anya's prescription needed to be filled, she finally hit rock bottom. She found herself sitting on a park bench, watching children play on the swings, their laughter a sound from a distant, happier world. She was contemplating the unthinkable, calling her estranged aunt, a woman who had disowned Elena's mother years ago, and would surely demand a steep price in pride and groveling for any help. As she sat there, steeling herself to make the humiliating call, a car pulled up to the curb beside her. It wasn't just a car. It was a statement. A long, impossibly black sedan, polished to a mirror shine, with windows so darkly tinted they seemed to swallow the light. It hummed with a quiet power that was utterly alien to this part of the city. The back door opened, and a man in a perfectly tailored grey suit stepped out. He was of Asian descent, with sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and an air of calm, unshakable competence. He looked completely out of place against the backdrop of the cracked pavement and overgrown weeds of the park. He approached her bench. Elena instinctively tensed, her mind racing. Was he a debt collector? Had Mr. Henderson sent someone? "Miss Elena Petrova?" the man asked. His voice was polite, professional, and held a tone that suggested it was not used to being ignored. "Who's asking?" Elena replied, her voice wary. "My name is David Chen. I am the executive assistant to the CEO of Vance Industries. My employer has requested a meeting with you. He has sent me to escort you." Elena stared at him, bewildered. Vance Industries? The tech company? "I think you have the wrong person. I don't know anyone there." "I can assure you I have the right person," David Chen said patiently. "My employer is Mr. Arthur Vance. He insisted I find you personally." The name meant nothing to her. "Look, I'm sorry, I have no idea what this is about. I haven't applied for a job there." David Chen's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "This is not about a job application. It is a personal matter. Mr. Vance believes he has something that belongs to you." He gestured towards the open door of the car. "He is waiting for you at the headquarters. We can explain everything there. I promise you, Miss Petrova, it is in your best interest." Elena's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and suspicion. Was this a scam? A prank? But the car was undeniably real. The man's suit was more expensive than her rent. And what other options did she have? Sit on this bench until she withered away. At the very least, it was a distraction from the crushing weight of her reality. "Okay," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Okay, I'll go." The ride was silent and surreal. The car's interior smelled of rich leather and quiet money. They glided through the city streets, leaving her gritty neighborhood behind for the gleaming steel and glass canyons of the financial district. They pulled up in front of a skyscraper that seemed to pierce the clouds, a monolithic testament to power and wealth. The words Vance Industries were etched in elegant silver letters above the grand entrance. David Chen led her through a cavernous marble lobby, past a security desk where guards nodded respectfully, and into a private elevator. He pressed the button for the top floor, the 80th floor. As they ascended, the pressure changed in her ears, and the city spread out below them like a map. The elevator opened directly into a vast, minimalist office. 3 of the walls were floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a breathtaking panoramic view of the world. The 4th wall was lined with bookshelves. In the center of the room was a massive desk made of dark, polished wood, and behind it in a high-backed leather chair, a man was looking out the window, his back to her. "Miss Petrova is here, sir," David Chen announced quietly, and then retreated, the elevator doors closing with a soft hiss, leaving Elena alone with the stranger. The man in the chair slowly swiveled around, and Elena's world stopped. It wasn't possible. Her mind refused to process what her eyes were seeing. The man was clean-shaven, his jawline strong and defined. His hair, now washed and expertly cut, was a distinguished salt and pepper. He wore a bespoke charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, and a crisp white shirt that highlighted the startling blue of his eyes. But it was him. The eyes were the same. The haunted, hollowed-out blue eyes of the homeless man from the diner. He stood up. He was taller than she remembered, more powerful. The weariness of the street had been replaced by an aura of command, though the sadness in his eyes remained. On the polished surface of his desk, placed as if it were a priceless artifact, was her sketchbook. "Miss Petrova," he said, and the voice was different too, deeper, smoother, without the raspy edge of cold and hunger. "Elena, I believe this is yours. I apologize for the unconventional way I came to possess it." Elena could only stare, her mouth agape. Words failed her. Homeless man. Billionaire CEO. The two realities crashed together in her mind, creating a dissonance that made the room feel like it was tilting. "You," she finally stammered. "How?" He offered a small, sad smile. "It's a long story. Please sit." He gestured to one of the chairs opposite his desk. Numbly, she did as he asked. "My name is Arthur Vance," he began, sitting down again. "And 3 nights ago, when I walked into your diner, I had nothing. That wasn't an act. It wasn't some twisted test to see who was kind. It was my reality." He paused, his gaze, distant, fixed on a memory she couldn't see. "A year ago, I lost my wife, Sarah, and my 7-year-old daughter, Lily, in a car accident. A drunk driver ran a red light." The confession was delivered so quietly, yet it filled the massive office with an unbearable weight. Elena felt a pang of empathy so sharp it was almost painful. "After that," he continued, his voice thick with emotion, nothing made sense. "This building, the company, the money, it all felt like a joke, a cruel, meaningless joke. I was surrounded by people, by lawyers and board members and accountants, but I had never felt more alone. So about 6 months ago, I just walked away. I put my second-in-command in charge, gave him a story about needing to go to a private wellness retreat, and I disappeared onto the streets. I wanted to feel something real, or maybe I just wanted to feel nothing at all. I'm not sure which." He looked at her, his blue eyes locking onto hers. I found what I was looking for. Indifference. People look through you. You're not a person. You're an inconvenience, a piece of scenery. For months, that's what I was. And then I walked into your diner. I was at my lowest point. I hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. I was ready to just give up entirely. He leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. And then you looked at me. You actually saw me. You risked your job for a stranger. You gave me a hot meal when your boss was threatening you. You didn't do it with pity. You did it with dignity. It was the first act of genuine, selfless human kindness I had experienced in a year. He gestured to the sketchbook. After you were let go. The cook Sal found this by the back door. He didn't know how to reach you. He knew from your conversations that you were a regular at a small coffee shop near your apartment. He went there and left the book with the owner, hoping you'd come by. My assistant David is very resourceful. It took him a day to track down Sal, retrieve the book, and then find you. He opened the sketchbook. It was turned to the page with his own portrait, the one she had started from memory. The charcoal captured the raw grief in his eyes with an artist's brutal honesty. Your kindness that night, Elena. Arthur Vance said, his voice low and intense. It was like a light being turned on in a dark room. It reminded me that there was still good in the world. It reminded me of the man my wife and daughter believed I was. It was the reason I decided to come back. You saved more than a homeless man that night. You saved me. Eleanor sat in stunned silence, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with terrifying speed. The homeless man, her firing the sketchbook, the black car, this impossible office. It was all connected. Her small act of kindness hadn't just been a ripple in a pond. It had been a tidal wave, and it had just come crashing back to her shore. The silence in Arthur Vance's office stretched thick with unspoken emotions. Elena's mind was still reeling, trying to reconcile the image of the shivering man in the diner with the powerful CEO sitting before her. He wasn't just a rich man. He was a man hollowed out by grief, and his story resonated with her own quiet desperation. I don't know what to say. She finally managed, her voice barely audible. I'm so sorry for your loss. Arthur gave a slight, pained nod. Thank you. I didn't tell you all of that or to elicit your sympathy. I told you so you would understand. This isn't about charity, Elena. This is about a debt of gratitude that I can never truly repay, but I am determined to try. He rose from his chair and walked over to the vast window, looking down at the city below. David's investigation was thorough. He informed me of the circumstances of your dismissal from the diner. I know about the spilled tea and the laptop. I also know that the customer in question, a Ms. Albright, works for a rival company, and that my former manager, Marco, has a history of similar behavior. It seems you were the victim of a setup, or at the very least a convenient excuse. He turned back to face her. David also informed me of your personal situation, your sister Anya, her medical needs. Elena stiffened. The mention of Anya made this intensely personal. A flush of protective anger and shame rose in her. You had me investigated. I had to understand, he said, gently sensing her defensiveness. I had to know who the person was that showed me such compassion. I wasn't looking for leverage, Elena. I was looking for context. He walked back to his desk and picked up her sketchbook, handling it with a reverence that touched her. He flipped through the pages, his expression softening as he took in the portraits of strangers, the detailed sketches of city architecture, the whimsical drawings of animals. This is more than a hobby, isn't it? he asked. "You have a remarkable talent. You don't just capture a likeness, you capture a soul. This drawing of me." He tapped the portrait. "You saw the man I was, not the rags I was wearing." He looked up at her, his gaze direct and serious. "I want to offer you a job, Eleanor. Not as a waitress, not as an assistant. I'm restructuring the Vance Foundation, the charitable arm of this company. For years, it's been a faceless entity, just writing checks to big-name charities. It was my wife's passion project, and I let it languish. I want to change that. I want it to have a heart. I want it to connect with people on a personal level. I want you to run it." Elena blinked. "Run it? Me, I don't have any experience. I have a community college degree in art history and a decade of experience balancing plates. I'm not qualified." "You are more qualified than any Ivy League graduate with a degree in non-profit management. I could hire," he countered passionately. "You have empathy. You have first-hand knowledge of what it's like to struggle to be invisible. You have integrity. You risked what little you had for a complete stranger. Those are the qualifications I'm looking for. You won't be alone. You'll have a full team. David will assist you. But the vision would be yours." The offer was staggering, a lifeline thrown to her as she was drowning. But it was more than that. It was a validation of her character, not her circumstances. "And another thing," he added, his tone softening. "As part of the executive compensation package, Vance Industries provides the best private health insurance in the country. It would cover all of Anya's treatments, all of them. Effective immediately." That was the moment her defenses crumbled. The thought of Anya free from the financial anxiety that shadowed her illness was an irresistible lure. Tears welled in Elena's eyes, tears of shock, of relief, of overwhelming gratitude. "But I can't just accept this," she whispered, shaking her head. "It feels wrong, like I'm being paid for that plate of meatloaf." "No," Arthur said firmly. "You're being hired for your character and your talent." The meatloaf was just the interview. The most honest interview I've ever conducted. "Please, Elena, say yes. Help me make this foundation something Sarah would have been proud of. Help me do some good with all of this stuff." He gestured around the opulent office, a look of distaste on his face. She took a deep breath, the air filling her lungs with something that felt like hope for the first time in years. "Okay," she said. "Yes, I accept." A brilliant, genuine smile transformed Arthur's face, erasing years of sadness for a fleeting moment. "Thank you. David will handle all the paperwork. He'll arrange for a car to take you home. We'll start tomorrow." Just then the office door, a seamless panel in the wood-paneled wall she hadn't even noticed, swung open. A man stood there, tall and impeccably dressed in a suit that seemed molded to his athletic frame. He had chiseled features, piercing dark eyes, and slicked-back black hair. He oozed an almost reptilian charm and confidence. He stopped short when he saw Elena. "Arthur," the man said, his voice a smooth baritone that didn't quite mask his surprise. "I didn't realize you had company. I thought we were reviewing the quarterly projections." "Julian," Arthur said, his tone becoming cooler, more formal. "We can do that later. Something more important has come up. I'd like you to meet Elena Petrova. She will be the new executive director of the Vance Foundation." The man, Julian Thorne, was the company's chief operating officer. He was the one Arthur had left in charge when he'd disappeared. For 6 months, Julian had tasted absolute power, and he had liked it. Arthur's sudden, miraculous return had been a severe blow to his ambitions. Julian's eyes flickered over Elena, taking in her simple, worn clothes, her bewildered expression. His gaze was a quick, dismissive appraisal, the kind one gives to the catering staff. A predatory smile touched his lips. "Petrova," he said, extending a hand, his grip firm and cold. "A pleasure. Executive Director. That's quite a leap. Where were you before this, if you don't mind my asking?" "The Gates Foundation. The Red Cross." The questions were light, but the subtext was heavy with condescension. Before Elena could answer, Arthur stepped in. "Elena's qualifications are her integrity and unique perspective, Julian. Something this company could use more of. She starts tomorrow." The challenge in Arthur's tone was unmistakable. Julian's smile tightened. He saw Eleanor not as a person, but as a new piece on the chessboard, a potential weakness in the returned king's armor. "Of course," Julian said, smoothly retreating. "How wonderful. Welcome to the team, Elena. I look forward to seeing your unique perspective in action." He gave her one last, lingering look before turning and leaving the office, closing the door behind him. The air he left behind felt chilled. Elena felt a shiver of apprehension. She had not just accepted a job. She had stepped into a world of power, wealth, and unseen currents of ambition. And in Julian Thorne's eyes, she had seen that she was not a welcome addition. She was an anomaly, an outsider. And in that world, outsiders were targets. Stepping into the world of Vance Industries was like learning to breathe a new kind of air, rarefied and thin. Elena's first week was a dizzying orientation into a universe of acronyms, board meetings, and unspoken hierarchies. David Chen became her anchor, a calm and steady guide through the corporate labyrinth. He patiently explained budget proposals, helped her set up her spacious new office, which was larger than her entire apartment, and ran interference for her with department heads, who viewed the new director of the foundation with thinly veiled skepticism. Eleanor threw herself into the work with a ferocious determination, driven by a deep-seated need to prove she belonged there, that she was more than just the CEO's pet project. She spent her first days not in her plush office, but in the foundation's archives, reading through years of old files. She discovered what Arthur had said was true. It was a checkbook charity, efficient but soulless. It gave millions to large established organizations, but had no grassroots connection, no personal touch. Her first proposal was simple yet revolutionary for the Vance Foundation. She wanted to start a micro-grant program called the Silver Spoon Initiative, aimed at providing immediate no-red-tape funding for small community-level projects, a new refrigerator for his soup kitchen, art supplies for an underfunded after-school program, emergency rent assistance for families on the brink of eviction. When she presented the idea to Arthur, his eyes lit up. "This is it, Elena. This is exactly it. This is helping people not just balance sheets." The change in her personal life was just as jarring. The first thing she did was fill Anya's prescription. Walking out of the pharmacy with the medicine in her hand, paid for in full by her new insurance card, she felt a wave of relief so profound, her knees went weak. That night, she told Anya everything. Her sister, wise beyond her years, was thrilled not just about the security, but about the light she saw back in Eleanor's eyes. "You're painting again with people, El," Anya had said, "just on a much bigger canvas." Eleanor moved out of her cramped apartment and into a comfortable modern condo in a safe building provided as a temporary corporate residence. For the first time in a decade, she wasn't living on the precipice of financial ruin. She bought new clothes, professional attire, that made her feel less like an imposter in the Vance Industries tower. But with every step forward, she felt the subtle, persistent pushback from Julian Thorne. He would corner her in the hallway, his questions dripping with false sincerity. "How is the little pet project coming along? Eleanor found any more strays to rescue?" He would accidentally leave her off the distribution list for important meetings, then feign surprise when she appeared flustered and unprepared. In board meetings, he was her most vocal critic. When she presented the Silver Spoon initiative, he was the first to attack it. "While Miss Petrova's sentiment is charming," he'd said, addressing the stone-faced board members, "it's fiscally irresponsible. We're talking about handing out small sums of money with minimal oversight. It's an accounting nightmare and a logistical black hole. The Foundation's purpose is large-scale impact, not playing fairy godmother to every sob story in the city." Arthur was always there to defend her. But Elena knew that his constant support was in a way making things worse. The rumors started to circulate, whispered in the glass-walled conference rooms and over expensive lunches. They called her the Waitress, Saint Elena of the diner, Arthur's lost cause. They speculated on the nature of her relationship with the grieving CEO, spinning a sordid tale of a conniving woman who had taken advantage of a billionaire's emotional vulnerability. The gossip hurt, but Elena refused to let it break her. She focused on her work, using her past experiences as her guide. She knew what it felt like to be one broken appliance away from disaster, one medical bill away from bankruptcy. She poured that understanding into her work, and the Silver Spoon initiative began to take shape. Its guidelines rooted in dignity and trust rather than suspicion and bureaucracy. Her relationship with Arthur deepened, evolving beyond that of employer and employee. They fell into a comfortable routine, often working late together, ordering in food, and talking for hours. He was fascinated by her art, and she was drawn to the man beneath the billionaire, the grieving husband and father, the philosopher who had sought meaning in anonymity. He spoke of Sarah and Lily, not with agonizing pain anymore, but with a gentle, wistful love. He told her how Sarah had been the one who wanted to start the foundation, how she had believed that their immense wealth was a responsibility, not a privilege. "You remind me of her," he confessed one evening as they looked out at the city lights from his office. "Not in looks, in spirit. She had that same fire, that same refusal to accept that the world has to be as cynical as it is." Elena felt a blush creep up her neck. She was intensely aware of him as a man of the quiet strength in his presence, the sadness that still lingered in his eyes. There was an undeniable chemistry between them, an unspoken connection forged in a moment of shared humanity, in a greasy spoon diner. But the chasm between their former lives and the power dynamics of their current situation made any personal feelings a dangerous, complicated territory. Julian Thorne saw this connection, and his attacks became more personal. He knew that Arthur's emotional state was his greatest vulnerability. He began digging, looking for any dirt he could find on Elena. He sent a private investigator to her old neighborhood to the diner. He was looking for a weapon, and he found one in Marco. One afternoon, David Chen entered Elena's office and closed the door, his face grim. "There's something you need to see." He handed her a tablet. It was open to a notorious city gossip blog. The headline was explosive: "Vance, CEO's new charity queen, a troubled past of theft and deceit." The article was a venomous character assassination. It quoted an anonymous former employer who described Elena as unstable, a known thief who regularly stole food, and someone who would do anything for a handout. It painted her act of kindness to Arthur as a calculated ploy, a trick she'd likely pulled before. It even included a doctored photo of her making her look haggard and shifty. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. The words were Marco's, she knew it. The poison was his. But the strategy, the cold, calculated cruelty of it, had Julian's fingerprints all over it. "Arthur has already seen it," David said quietly. "He's furious. He knows it's lies." But Elena knew the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted. To the board, to the world, she wasn't an empathetic leader. She was a waitress with a shady past who had somehow bewitched a grieving billionaire. Julian hadn't just attacked her reputation. He had attacked the very foundation of her new life. And she knew this was only the beginning of his campaign to destroy her, and through her, to destroy Arthur. Julian Thorne's vicious smear campaign culminated in an emergency board meeting, his final move to oust Arthur. The air in the room was thick with tension as Julian presented his case, portraying Arthur as an emotionally compromised leader whose judgment was fatally clouded by his charity case, Eleanor. To seal his argument, he played cleverly edited security footage from the diner and brought in Elena's spiteful ex-manager Marco to deliver a scathing, fabricated testimony against her. With the board wavering, Julian called for a vote of no confidence, the scent of victory in the air. Before the board could vote, Eleanor stood, her voice steady and clear. She didn't plead for mercy. She commanded respect. With a powerful presentation, she systematically dismantled Julian's narrative, showcasing the incredible success and positive ad generated by her Silver Spoon initiative. She proved that the very compassion Julian mocked was in fact the company's greatest emerging asset. Just as she won over the room, Arthur delivered the final blow. He revealed he had anticipated the betrayal, producing a dossier detailing Julian's own crimes, embezzlement, and corporate espionage with a key rival. The revelation was a bombshell. Stunned silence erupted into outrage as Julian, the true traitor, was exposed. He was escorted out by security, his ambitions crumbling into ruin. Arthur's authority was instantly restored, his position stronger than ever. In that boardroom, Elena wasn't just vindicated. She had faced down the company's darkest elements and proven that her integrity was an unbreakable shield, and her vision the company's brightest future. In the wake of Julian's exposure, the whispers about Elena at Vance Industries turned to murmurs of respect. The Silver Spoon initiative flourished, becoming the compassionate new heart of the company and cementing Elena's sense of purpose. With Anya's health stable and her own future secure, Elena finally found a peace she had never known. Her relationship with Arthur deepened into a true partnership, though an unspoken question about their future lingered in the air between them. One crisp autumn evening, Arthur drove her to the city's art district, stopping before a prestigious gallery, whose sign now bore a new name, the Petrova Gallery. Confused, Elena followed him inside and gasped. The pristine white walls were covered with her own art, her charcoal portraits from the old sketchbook and vibrant new paintings hung in the soft light, each piece a testament to a dream she thought she had lost. In the center, in a place of honor, was her drawing of him, the homeless man with the billionaire's eyes. He took her hand, his gaze full of an emotion that left no room for doubt. "I wanted the world to see the person I see when I look at you," Arthur said, his voice low. "Not a waitress or a director, an artist. A brilliant, compassionate woman I've fallen in love with." Tears of joy streamed down Elena's face. This wasn't a gift of money. It was the gift of being truly seen. "I love you too," she whispered. As he kissed her, the last barriers of their pasts dissolved. They were no longer the billionaire and the waitress, but simply Arthur and Eleanor, two souls who had found their purpose and each other, ready to paint their future together. Elena Petrova's story started with a single plate of food, a simple act of compassion that cost her a job but gained her a universe. It's a powerful reminder that we never truly know the impact of our choices. The person you help today could be anyone, but the change it makes in you is what truly matters. Elena didn't just find a fairy tale ending. She found her purpose. Arthur didn't just reclaim his fortune. He rediscovered his humanity. They didn't save each other. They empowered each other to save themselves. Their story teaches us that kindness isn't a transaction, it's a transformation. It's the most valuable currency we have, and it's the only one that enriches both the giver and the receiver. What did you think of Elena's incredible journey? Let us know in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs a little inspiration, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that will restore your faith in humanity. Thank you for watching.